Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Halifax Water Board of Commissioners on Thursday, September 28th. I believe we're going to start with a few words of welcome from Tarek.
All right, well, thanks everyone on behalf of the executive team and our supporting small and mighty team in the back, making sure that this is a smooth meeting. Thank you all for attending my first board meeting as the General Manager and CEO for Halifax Water. So you see me be more today in listening mode, but I'm pretty sure you probably are very familiar with the topics that the team will be presenting. Again, looking forward for your advice, direction, and any feedback that you might have on any of the topics that we would be presenting today. Again, thank you, and appreciate being here, all of you today. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Tarek, and an official welcome to the team, even though you've been here for many months now, but since it's our first board meeting. And as well, welcome to Peter Duncan joining us on behalf of the CAO's office. Thank you for joining us, Peter. We really look forward to you contributing to our meetings. Okay, we'll get going. Item 1A, ratification of the in-camera motions. If I could have someone make that motion.
I'll move that, Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Kent.
Thank you. I'll move that a ratification, Halifax Board of Police, Board of Halifax Water Commission, ratification of the in-camera motions, that Halifax Water Board ratify the in-camera motions of today, and B, that the Halifax Water Board approve the order of business and approve additions and deletions. I guess that's not appropriate, is it?
You just got the first one.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm used to them being A and B. Thank you.
And Commissioner Zarhov has seconded that. All in favor of the in-camera motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Item 1B, approval of the business agenda. Could somebody move that?
I can do that one this time.
Go. Oh, how about Commissioner Cuddle?
Okay, good.
Great, thanks. Want me to read the motion?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
All right, that Halifax Water Board approve the order of business and approve additions and deletions.
Second.
Commissioner Kent has seconded that. Any additions?
Commissioner Daigle-Gammon.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Daigle-Gammon. Sorry. Any additions or deletions? No? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Item 2, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on Thursday, June 22nd, 2023. Could I have somebody make that motion?
I'll move that Halifax Water Board approve the minutes of the June 22nd, 2023 regular meeting.
Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Zarhov has already seconded that. And I mentioned before I'm on one screen, so if I'm missing you, you'll have to put it in the chat, but I will try to manage here. Any modifications to the minutes required? I just noted one, sorry, I just have to find it. On item, I think it's like the top of page 2, the chair's remarks about recognizing Cecile and Denise Schofield. I believe we also thanked Louis de Montbron in that. So I'd appreciate if somebody could check the recording and amend that paragraph, but I am very sure I thanked Louis for his service as well.
Yes.
So
it is the most important issue.
Thank you.
Thank
So I would motion for the minutes to be amended with that item.
second that, Kathy here.
Thank you. All in favor of the amended minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are approved as amended. And thank you again, Louis. I have item 3, business arising from the minutes, the capital project dashboard. Is this
Thank you, Madam
Reed?
Chair. I'll discuss this and then Reed might jump in as well.
Okay.
So this was an item that was requested as an action item at the last meeting for staff to come forward at this meeting with a dashboard for capital projects. We're in that space where we're kind of just implementing our new ERP program, Kayenta. We're in the midst of finalizing the project for the capital project management software program, tracking those projects. And so we're kind of in that spot right in between there. And we need a little bit more time before we can provide a dashboard without it being too administratively burdensome for staff to pull together that dashboard. And so I'll defer to Reed as to the timing that he thinks would be more appropriate for this particular action item, but I did want to provide that update.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. I would just add there's 2 factors, and one is Louis' team is still working very hard on the rollout of Kayenta. So my team still does not have the same level of access to Kayenta that they had to SAP previously. So even using the spreadsheets and things that we do within the department, we're in a spot of difficulty that's going to correct itself soon, and Louis might have a word on that. But the part that's going to be really helpful and useful is the implementation of our capital project planning and management information system. So we are building that with our contractor. It's a software platform called Origo Masterworks. Right now, it's scheduled to be completed in March. I probably don't have any better information on that. It's possible that we might have some dashboard products a little in advance of March. It's also possible that it might be sometime shortly after March.
Are there any questions for Reed on that? Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharov.
Yeah, I requested this action item, so I think I'll jump on this one, Madam Chair. So, Reed, I understand and appreciate that there is some, software being implemented, but I suspect capital projects are being tracked on senior level, on a high level, with regards to milestone implementation and budget spend. So I'm a little bit surprised that we won't have any dashboards or any reports on capital project implementation for the next 6 months. I'm not expecting not requesting any super detailed reports that will break down to the number after the dot, but I suspect there is some sort of internal tracking of project status, of where the implementation is, and how much budget remains to spend, and etc. I still would like to see some sort of a report and update before Kayenta being implemented.
Okay. Louis, did you want to say something?
Yeah, if I may, item number 4.2 on the agenda is the financial part of that process. Item number 6 is a detailed report by project of any items that were over or under budget. So there is a fair amount of financial information that's presented and comes to the board regularly. So, from a financial perspective, in terms of status of an individual project, that's a different issue. But in terms of the financial aspects, that certainly comes to the board on a regular basis.
And I would just add, I guess maybe it was our misunderstanding of the request, but a dashboard to me is a graphic that allows you to look at different views of summary information and roll-up information, and that's what we're going to have, and allows you to drill down into specific projects and see what their exact status is, and that's very much what we hope to have in March. We do track individual projects and their status. I typically update the board on the highlights verbally if there's specific things. Largely, it's done on spreadsheets, and that's part of our transition from being a capital budget of 30 million to much larger. But if there's very specific information or key projects you want reports on, we're happy to do that.
If I remember, the discussion was because for the capital approvals that, various stages of the projects are being presented for like design and then implementation and etc. And I requested to see some sort of a dashboard on where this project stands, and again, against which milestone are we approving this pay or this, budget or that budget. So yeah, I don't think we need to spend too much time on discussing the details, probably how the dashboard will look like. But have a high-level executive summary of the project in progress. Something would be, more visual, would be greatly appreciated before the ERP software will be implemented.
Yeah, well, and on projects that come forward to the board, I do recall you made that request, and that's already been handed on to staff. So when we do bring projects forward for capital approval, we will be commenting on which stage we are in the project development process, what the milestones are ahead, how much money's been spent to date, all that. So that's going to come forward with capital requests that come to the board going forward.
Okay, thank you, Reid. We'll keep that as a priority for the board, looking for that dashboard. Okay, next item 4.1, operating results as at July 31st, 2023 and year-end projections.
Louis, you're muted.
You would think by now I could figure that part out. I'm going to run through some of the key highlights. One of the things that we've done, as you can see in the board report, we have attached the full audit finance report and reference that these items were reviewed and discussed, and you'd see that in a couple of the financial places where the reports have gone to audit and finance already. So I'll just walk through some of the key highlights. Jake, if you can go forward just a couple of pages. The one that I always like to start with is the amount of money we have. So we currently have cash in the bank of approximately $39 million at the end of June. It's one of those items that comes to me daily that I'm monitoring. What we do see is a significant decrease from year end, which is expected as we improve the amount of capital that we spend. I'll just go one step below around our accounts receivable. They've gone up by approximately $4.7 million. That relates primarily to where we are in our billing cycles, and that's a normal change that we will see as we go through the fiscal year, depending on the timing of which part of the billing cycle we're in. If you can just skip to the forward another couple of pages, Jake. I was just going to talk to the accounts payable. Accounts payable has gone up by about $2.6 million from year end. As I referenced, as our capital spend increases, we start to see our cash coming down. We also start to see our payables coming up. So this is sort of a normal part of our cycle. So we continue to monitor that, and it's within the normal expectations that we would have. Jake, if you can go to the next page. The next area I'd like to highlight just at the bottom is the earnings for the year. So we have earnings to the end of June of approximately $3.2 million. A little further on in the report, there's the breakdown by service. So water has a very small deficit at the end of June. Wastewater has a surplus of almost 2.9 million, and stormwater has a surplus of about $350,000. The revenue has increased significantly from last year, primarily related to the fact that we had rate increases in both December and April. So we're seeing the effects of that, and we continue to monitor our progress as we go through the year. I won't bother to walk through each page, as it's as I just talked about operating revenue. The increases are related to our rate increases. There's the changes that are happening on the operating expenditures are, there's pluses and minuses spread throughout the organization, so nothing particularly to highlight there. And if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Any questions for Louis? Excellent job, Louis. They have no questions for you.
Thank you.
Continuing on, item 4.2, capital expenditures as at July 31st, 2023 and year-end projection.
So again, I can talk to this one, and if I can reference the same thing, we've attached the report that went to the Audit and Finance Committee. So it provides the key highlights of what we had. We have two corporate balance scorecard measures that we use related to capital. One is to spend 70 to 80% of our current year's budget. And also, as you know, we added an additional corporate balance scorecard to increase or to track the level of spend. The dollar amount we've used is $135 million, which is the average spend from the IRP. So those two items are in our corporate balance scorecard. What I will sort of walk through here, and Jake, if you can just go, there's a table on page 3 of the, that'd be perfect. So we tend to present, and we can present as much detail as the board requires. The total budget that's available is approximately $400 million. We started the year with expenditures of about $78 million related that we had spent as of the end of the year. Was in between April, May, and June, we've spent a further $22.7 million. So in total for the outstanding capital budget, we have total spend of $101 million as of the end of June. So there's approximately $300 million that's available, and those break down into the active projects that we have. We continue to track the average monthly spend, and that has continued to increase, which is a very positive sign. June tends to be at the beginning part of our capital program. A lot of the work is done through the summer, so the expectation is when September results are provided, you'll see those numbers grow considerably. And if they have any questions, I'm sure between Reid and I, we can help provide answers.
Any questions for Louis or Reid? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
Louis, what I'm wondering is when can we expect to see the results? You mentioned that September will be an important time to determine how the summer went. Can we expect to see that at the next board meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 4.3, the fall 2023 debenture.
Again, I can speak to this one. Madam Chair, there is a motion. I'm not sure if you want to start with me walking through the issue or the motion.
We'll start with the motion. Could somebody put the motion on the floor? It's on the screen.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Daigle-Gammon here. I can put the motion on the floor if you like.
Please go ahead.
Move that the Halifax Water Board approve the financing of $39,988,188 with a 30-year amortization term and finance over 10 years with an all-inclusive rate not to exceed 6.5%. And 2, the refinancing of $10,472,225 with a 10-year amortization term and financing over 10 years with an all-inclusive rate not to exceed 6.5%.
I'll second. Yeah, Commissioner Kent.
Commissioner Kent will second. Thank you. Go ahead, Louis. Thank you for that.
So this is normal business in terms of how we finance our capital. These are the numbers that we would have put forward in the budget that we were going to issue. The $40 million in new debt, the requirement to refinance the $10.4 million is just normal part of the way the business works. We continue to use a rate of 6.5%. That is what the provincial government recommends we use, and that gives us a fair amount of cushion of what we expect the actual rates to be, and saves us having to come back to the board if we had chosen a lower rate and it happens to be slightly over. So we expect that the debt would come in similar to what our last debt issue came in at, was a rate closer to about 4%, which is where we had projected in our budget. So this really is normal business and consistent with what we presented in the budget and how we continue to finance our capital assets.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Louis. I was a little bit interested in the alternative 2 that is proposed there around the debenture. And I guess when we put alternatives in, it means that it is an option. Is the reason that it's not considered because we are within that 35%, was it 35% or of the debt service ratio that is allowable? I think we're at 18.9 and we can be within, what is it, 35% or something like that?
Yeah, so the municipal guarantee is under that arrangement, we need to keep a debt service ratio below 35%. So we have next to no risk at this point of going up against that limit, right, which is great. The alternatives are there because in theory, with $39 million in the bank, we could run closer to a lower cash balance and not take on the additional expense of debt. Right. It's a very fine margin in terms of how low do you bring your bank account. As we continue to increase our capital, it's really important that we have the money in the bank when the expenditures happen and we're able to pay our vendors. So we could, the alternatives are there to say, yep, we could be challenged to try and bring the number down. The amount of cash we have in the bank, it's not recommended because the number is hard to predict. Okay. Very hard. Yeah. If we don't have the cash in the bank, we have very few options to get cash to payments.
Yeah. And I guess where we're at almost 47% of our capital spend, then that would be another factor to not go with the alternative, but to go with the motion that's on the floor, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for helping me understand that better, Louis. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions regarding the motion on the floor?
Call for the question.
Yes, please. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Item 4.4, auditor appointment. I have a motion to be put forward.
I'll move that, Madam Chair. Oh,
go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
I move that the Halifax Water Board appoint Grant Thornton LLP as auditors for the Halifax Regional Water Commission financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 2024, and the Halifax Regional Water Commission employee pension plan for the year ended December 31st, 2023.
I'll second.
Thank you. So I just have a quick question on that. Madam Chair. So, you know, I know that it's difficult to find auditors. We're a small province. And I understand under the legislation, and maybe I'm incorrect on this, but we actually need to have someone from the province do this work. So I'm just wondering, how limited is the pool for auditors for the Halifax Water Commission?
So if I may, just for clarity, we do not require the provincial government to be involved in our audit at all. So we're very similar to the municipality from that perspective. We did go out, so Grant Thornton has been the auditor for Halifax Water for many, many years. We did go out to tender and opened it up to the public in terms of who was able to put forward a bid. We did that a couple years ago. We had 2 people who bid and submitted bids. Grant Thornton was the lowest of the bids. We actually, when we went to do the procurement, made sure that there was nothing in our documents that required it to be a large firm, because Grant Thornton is a big audit firm, but we are always try to make sure that there's nothing in our requests or our procurement documents that makes people think it has to be a large firm.
Right. Sorry, just for the clarification, my point was that there are limited people within the province of Nova Scotia, not that the provincial government is in some way connected. But I guess my understanding is that we can't have an auditor from outside of the province. So New Brunswick, a firm, for example, are they permitted to respond to the RFP?
They could if they have the credentials to be able to audit in Nova Scotia. So they may have to have, the partner may have to be a member of the Nova Scotia Institute of whatever it is now, whatever we're called.
Okay.
So I don't, and that I think would be relatively easy to get. So I don't think it's a particularly difficult bar. I will say Nova Scotia and Halifax in particular is very well represented in terms of its auditors and the pool of firms that are here that could do the audit.
Okay, thanks, Louis. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. How many years has Grant Thornton been our auditor? Years.
I'm going to guess, because I don't know for sure, but we can certainly, it would be relatively easy to confirm.
Right.
My guess is at least the last 15 years.
Right. Louis, my only comment really would be, and I know that sometimes, I know as a utility, we don't have to have, there's no limit on when we have an auditor, but sometimes firms will change the staff member that might be assigned to an audit if an auditor becomes rather familiar, I guess, with the agency that they're doing a financial audit on. So would we, or would Grant Thornton, when they responded to the last RFP, did they have any comment about changing who the staff member might be that leads our financial audit?
The lead partner is required to change on a regular basis. So prior to this last RFP that we did with Grant Thornton, the lead partner was somebody who had been on the audit for a number of years. And since then we've had Tom Brockway. He's been doing it for, I think, the last 3 years.
Right.
So yes, there is a requirement for them to turn over. They are required to have second partners review to make sure that they're doing the work consistently, etc. So I suspect there will be a time fairly soon where Tom comes off the audit and there's a new partner to come in for exactly the reason you referenced.
Thank you very much, Louis. That's awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Cuddle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I had a similar question just in terms of the number of years that we've been using Grant Thornton. And has there ever been any discussion at the board level around actually changing auditors, not just the lead on the audit, and how that fits in with governance best practice.
So I don't know if that, sorry, if that question was addressed to the board or.
I'll leave it with you, Louis, but it's a great question. I think obviously probably the procurement process was meant to make sure it was a fulsome process, Commissioner Cuddle, but we could take that away as a item to look at the governance piece if you'd like.
Yeah, because I think when we, if our only qualifier is the lowest bidder, then that doesn't really, open it up to looking at other best practices around audit and governance. So I think that would be worth a discussion.
And may I suspect that HRM has exactly the same issue. As I was there for many years. KPMG has been the auditor for HRM for a long time. But the same sort of issues that the partners continue to change, which is part of the issue that to make sure that we don't have continue to have an appropriate level of audit done.
Yeah.
I will say in the last procurement process, we had 2 firms put their bid forward. The difference in price was double. So the second bid was literally twice as much as what we put forward with what Grant Thornton put forward. So there is a knowledge of the business is certainly an advantage when people are putting forward the bids, putting forward their proposals. Financial is not the only consideration. The firm has to be able to demonstrate that they can do the audit. So that is our threshold. So we do have the 2 pieces that are required.
Right. Thank you, Louis.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
I just wanted to also answer Commissioner Cuddle's question and note that we did discuss this at the last Audit and Finance Committee meeting. It wasn't voted on, it was brought to this regular board, but we did discuss it. We discussed it from the financial perspective, however. So when you mention governance, I think if anything, that might have to go to the exec team or to the broader board rather than in the Audit and Finance, because we didn't explore that perspective.
All right, great, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, Louis, we went straight to discussion. Did you want to present anything before the vote?
The only other thing I would have referenced is that we do have a 5-year arrangement with Grant Thornton, and I'll call it an arrangement. They are required by the board to. The board is required to appoint them every year, so that gives us a natural out if the board said, nope, we're not satisfied, or we want to change for governance reasons to do something different. We have that ability through this process that we're doing now.
Thank you, Louis. I think that's a good point to note. Okay, we'll go ahead with the vote. The motion is on the floor as shown on the screen. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. The next item is item 5, July 21st, 2023 flooding event update.
Madam Chair, if I could just interject for a moment.
Go ahead.
I just want to clarify, was there an action item that came out of that last discussion that you would like staff to take away, or is the board satisfied with the discussion as it occurred?
I think the expectation would be that when the recommendation to, when staff comes forward to recommend the appointment for next year, then they would show that discussion on either they're recommending to continue with the 1-year appointment or that there's been further discussion on a governance side for a different recommendation. So the expectation is just regular business that when the recommendation comes forward next year, that item is considered in the recommendation to the board.
Thank you.
But it's under a governance side, not, we know we have it covered under procurement, but it would be for staff to look at if the governance side. Go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
Just wanted clarity on that. So would that come up then prior to the board meeting where we would be voting on that? We would need some time to discuss it ahead of time. So would that be the previous board meeting or the previous exec meeting that would be raised?
So it would come to audit and finance again as a recommendation for the annual cycle. And then if staff needs further direction on governance, then it would come through the executive committee.
Thank you.
Does that help, Heidi? Yes. Okay, item 5, flooding event update. I'm not sure who this is.
That would be myself.
Colin. Go ahead,
Good morning,
Colin.
Chair. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. How are we doing? So we're going to give a quick update regarding the flood of July 21st and subsequent intensive precipitation events and how that has impacted operations. So if I can move to the next slide, please, Jake. So just to contextualize this for everyone heading into that weekend, the biggest concern we had as a utility and the operations department was the repair to the 36-inch main on Dunbrack. We'd been planning this for a number of weeks and months. It was an emergency situation, and you know, it is the main supply for around about 25,000 customers. So going into that, on the radar, this was the only thing that we thought we were going to be dealing with. Unfortunately, nature had other demands of us, let's say. So we did manage to complete this during the storm, and were able to secure the supply for those 25,000 customers. Next slide, please, Jake. So due to the significance of the rainfall and the impact on our infrastructure, we were already in an emergency incident command structure. So we were able to expand that incident command structure to cope with or manage the incoming flood of, excuse the pun, incoming flood of complaints and issues with our systems. So ICS was expanded to dedicate 2 incident commanders, one to oversee the Dunbrack repair and the other one to oversee our storm response. And the ICS moved to area command on 800 hours on the Saturday, the 22nd of July. Next slide, please, Jake. So some of the impacts, what happened going in is we had an issue transferring from our regular call center hours to our out of hours service, which caused an issue with customers routing their feedback from the system. So gathering intelligence about what was going on in the field became difficult. Many driveway culverts and shoulders, as we know, were washed out or completely destroyed. And we had 75% of our pump stations had power issues, which resulted in them being offline. The most significant one of them, pump station wise, was the structure at Farmers Dairy, which ended up being under about 8 to 10 feet of water at the peak of the flood. And we also had some issues at our Frame wastewater treatment facility, where some of the embankment was eroded. Next slide, Jake. So as I said, there some of the wastewater treatment plants also experienced power outages. Our dams were obviously impacted. Even though the areas most impacted were in the Hammonds Plains area and Potwalk would have been the primary deposition of that precipitation, the upper reaches of the Lake Major watershed also saw impacts from that intensive precipitation, which moved both those structures into a warning and blue phase, which means that they had to undergo enhanced monitoring as per our emergency response plan pertaining to our dams and public safety and environmental management. We also saw impacts to our 2 regional water supply plants very, very quickly. In Potwalk, within 8 hours, the water quality had changed significantly, basically doubling the burden on the plant in terms of us removing natural organic matter, which required us to work through the night to do some process changes and bring that to heal a little bit. Throughout this entire process, those regional supply plants remained compliant, exceeding all Canadian drinking water guidelines and permit requirements. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of the requests of the region. This was as of the end of last month. You just break it down with a summary by region for a grand total of 422. That has increased slightly as obviously as we get more intelligence and see more damage from subsequent precipitation events, because we have an infrastructure, a system there. It has been weakened by the storm events, so we're seeing some of that move forward. If we can move that forward again, Jake, to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in total, we had a total of 847 work orders. Now, to contextualize that for the board, that means every one of them we have to send a crew out to the site, observe what's happening in the field, and then disseminate, is there action required, and then prioritize that in emergency order. Next slide, please. So on top of the emergency calls, we have Kenda's group who are dealing with the non-emergency drainage calls, and they had over 700 non-emergency drainage inquiries. Now that has now increased to close to 900 calls again, as we see more precipitation events, more information coming in for the field. So it was a very, very significant event, and the importance of reporting coming through the customer call center cannot be overstated, because it allows us to properly triage and prioritize our response and make sure we don't duplicate any of our efforts. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you the kind of magnitude of the storm. The navy blue solid line is the 1 in 100 year flood event. The dotted line is basically what climate change would lead to unchecked, and I think it's at the beyond the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark into the year 2050. As you can see, that single event exceeded that by more than double. There was one weather station out there that indicated that this was close to a 1 in 200 to 1 in 250 year event. So our infrastructure was quite quickly and quite obviously overwhelmed by that, as we're designed for between a 1 in 5 and 1 in 10 event as a design standard. Next slide, please. So post-storm cleanup activities, we went through the list of work orders that were created. We generated a priority list. Crews responded to assess the damage and complete repairs. And we engaged contractors, different contractors and different work packages as per procurement rules would allow under our emergency response framework, and all major repairs that were identified were repaired. And next slide, please. So at the end of the storm, within 7 days from the impact of the storm and us declaring the incident over, we had restored access to over 200 properties. So that was 200 properties that the property owners could not access because the culverts had either washed out or their driveways had completely washed out, and it was Halifax Water's responsibility. So we were able to get those repaired and access restored to those properties within 7 days. And that's 7 calendar days, not 7 business days. So, our operations team deserve a lot of credit for that, especially coming out of, our responses to other emergencies prior to this flood event. All wastewater treatment plant facilities came back online. They were all compliant. The regional water plants continue to deal with that heavy organic loading, so we are still suffering from the impacts of this storm. This is probably something we're going to be dealing with for many months, if not years to come. So a post-structure inspection was carried out on all of our dams as per the Canadian Dam Association requirements and as part of our dam safety management system. And all of the structures passed without any notable findings. So coming out of that event, all of our structures performed really well in terms of their large-scale reservoir impoundments. Next slide, please. So with that whirlwind tour of the events of July 24th and subsequent storms, I will open it to questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Colin. That was very helpful. And on behalf of the board, thank you to the entire team. That was a monumental event to have to respond to. And we appreciate all the hard work, both on the Dunbrack main and the eventual flood response. We know that the team is still working on some of those items. And as well, thank you to the board. We know that many of you also get inquiries on a lot of those similar customer inquiries. So thank you to the board members and the city councilors that are dealing with that. We do continue to emphasize to, we know you're responding to individual complaints, but the more we can funnel through the customer care center helps us all as well. So, but that was a remarkable response. Okay, I see a few questions. Commissioner Lovelace.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Colin. I was very eager to get this update. As you mentioned, Hammond's Plains was greatly impacted by the flash flooding. And, while we're only talking about Halifax Water infrastructure, just to be clear, the devastation exceeds all the way into St. Margaret's Bay and down Peggy's Cove Road. And it's just unbelievable to see the extent of the damage and the danger to those who are on the road or trying to get out of the driveway. So when we look at the deterioration of our source water, in particular, looking at JD Klein and Lake Major and so on, and thinking about all of that runoff, I think that for me is a strong indication why we need to develop some kind of quality management process for stormwater and for runoff. It is concerning when we don't really know or control what's coming into our watershed and don't really have a way to control that. But at the same time, on the flip of that, we're also looking at work that we're doing to address some of these major issues, from driveway culverts so that people can get in and out of their homes safely, which unfortunately for the rural areas, that's impacting their dug wells and the quality of water then that's going into their dug wells. So I guess the takeaway that I'm focused on from this damage from the storm is not only the infrastructure damage, but it's looking at the lack of quality that we have for our storm water and trying to find a way to manage that quality so that we're not creating problems down the road. Whether that means building up, the naturalization better, or working with the province to address their stormwater ponds along the highways or their drainage corridors or whatever. I think there's a long list of things that we have to look at, Colin, and to the team as a broader issue. So I have a question, because I know we've got 800 City Works work orders, and I have to say I was completely impressed with the team and how fast they moved to get those driveway culverts done and to address the culvert issues. I do also want to mention how important it is that we're working very closely with the Department of Environment, because as we're upgrading and replacing these cross culverts, we need to make sure that we're doing that in a way that recognizes fish passage or recognizes the regulations from the Department of Environment. But a lot of times that means upgrading the equipment, right? We're not just putting the same infrastructure that was in there before, we're putting in much more larger and more expensive infrastructure. And so I think this is something that potentially we need to be addressing from a communications perspective for residents, for customers, because it's not just a quick fix. So for example, in the next couple of weeks, fingers crossed, we're going to be closing Hammond's Plains roads. We can address deteriorating cross culvert. The upgrade of that will be expensive, but the issues for closing a road is going to be is problematic. So as we update this, these former provincial wooden cross culverts, we're putting a huge burden on our customer base. And, you know, I'm really concerned as far as where that's going, because we have, as we know, we have over 50 wooden cross culverts that we've inherited from the provincial government. So I just wonder if you can speak to that. I think you said you had 12 right now on the list to look at, but there's over 50. So I'm just wondering, Colin, where does that sit?
These 12 are the ones that were most impacted and the most critical and prioritised. You know, as for the rest of them, you know, they would be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And as you say, it's more of a programme issue and a joint, you know, venture with you know, our partners at the city and our partners at the province. You know, some of these are in water courses that require permits and environmental management. So these are the types of things that, you know, have to be given due consideration. And you know, I would you know, open it to either my colleague Reid Campbell from a capital point of view, or from Kenda from, you know, the drainage point of view and the regulatory point of view to jump in. But it's definitely recognised as an issue that, you know, again, like you correctly said, we inherited. So you know, we have to have a way to assess that and you know, program that over the coming years, because again, to your point, this is not something that we're going to fix within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even, you know, 2 years. So
well, no, and I understand the window for those water courses is pretty short, right? We're looking from June until the end of September, and here we are, September 28th. We know we've got to fix this wooden cross culvert on Hammond Plains Road. There's not a huge window to actually do this work.
that's correct. And again, that's going to take a lot of consideration and planning, and that's why it's not a tomorrow fix.
Okay.
Okay, thank you,
Sorry,
Commissioner
Reid,
Lovelace.
did you want to take any of that, or you're on mute?
Just a couple of quick things, Commissioner Lovelace. You know, in terms of the list, there's a couple things. One is some of them we're doing in tandem with HRM, so there is a longer list, and in some cases where it was simply a matter of putting the road back together and then we have time to go fix the culvert next year, we're doing that. So then it's a more formalized capital program where we could do it in better conditions, tender a project, that type of thing. Also, we have a definition of between a bridge and a culvert, and if it's above a certain size, we call it a bridge, even though it might look like a culvert. And HRM looks after bridges, we look after culverts. But there's a lot of communication going on between Halifax Water Engineering and construction ops staff and Halifax Waters, and these are all being triaged. We've got 2 or 3 as well that are going to be left for next year. They need to be replaced, but they're still serviceable. But same thing, we're going to get a proper design done, work with Department of Fisheries, get the proper environmental management in place, tender them and do them next year. So we're going to be working on these for quite some time.
Yeah, and so some of those wooden culverts that you were referring to, those are in the asset management program that Reid has and are being programmed through their end of life, service life process. So we will be getting to those, and those are part of the inventory and what we are planning from a cost perspective and everything. So they're not new to us. Some of them might have been expedited a little bit timeline wise, just because they didn't fail during the storm, but they may have incurred a bit more flow and impact than they were anticipated to. I do want to circle back. I know there wasn't a question there, but if you wouldn't mind, as it relates to the water quality within the watersheds, we do have the areas that Colin mentioned are within the protected watershed. The impacts are not from a water quality perspective from development next door or anything like that. It's just natural, given the volume and the intensity of the rain, the natural organics that existed within the watershed ran into the water, the lakes, the 2 lakes that we're concerned about. And so we're just seeing that natural vegetation that made its way into the lake, and we're trying to address that. So I just wanted to make sure that there was clarity around the fact that they weren't impacted by outside sources. And so
our water quality team is monitoring and working with operations to try and address the impacts. So just wanted to flag that.
No, I can really appreciate that, Kenda, because it's a large area in the watershed. But obviously for folks who have a dug well, it's a pretty small, space. And so when that stormwater floods their property and their dug well, which many people along the coastline, that's all they can have. They can't have a drilled well. So there's a significant issue with the quality of water within that dug well. So I do think that that's something that we have to think about moving forward and potentially have a sit down with the Department of Environment and figure out, what is the impact for stormwater to dug wells and how can we mitigate that to ensure that, Halifax Water isn't causing or creating issues for those dug wells along the coastline. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the province published a lot of helpful documents during that period. So.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kent?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you all for everything that was done for those periods. That's been difficult for many, many families that we as councillors represent, and I know as you as part of this utility and the other commissioners feel strongly about the work that we're doing. So just want to say that. I think what rang out to me most evidently in this presentation, certainly as a councillor, and I'm sure others other councillors will reflect on this, is that we do get a lot of context during these events. And of course, we also have significant networks and abilities to get information out. This kind of presentation, I think, is has contents of a really important public communication piece. I think the public needs to know what kind of response we've had, what kind of calls we had, how many are still in the queue, understanding that there's a lot at play in order to address them. As Pam mentioned, there's other areas that have still are impacted and not repaired. I think we need to work on some form of a communication piece on that. At the very, very least, we need to reaffirm, and not only to the public, but to us as councillors, because we're in the throes of distress as well when we're getting so many calls. And I literally went out in my rubber boots and went through a lot of all that stuff into people's basements and things. And of course we have connections to you and to others, but to use that call center line, and why? We tend to, of course, we refer them to those for billing inquiries or concerns that they might have an argument related to something in Halifax Water. But it is so important that they use that. I think I'd really encourage you to do a very specific communications piece that is a quick send out at any time when we know something's coming. It's also something we should do in advance of all of that to show them that we're taking these seriously. These are not normal situational events. We know climate impact is changing and we can expect these again. So be prepared. Be prepared with that number on your fridge to call in relation to stormwater concerns. And why? Because what you explained today, getting it in multiple places and having duplicates and sorting through that duplication during those events and shortly after will delay any response that they're looking for. And they need to understand that. So I really think that something of that nature needs to go out. It can't just go out in the water bill, in my opinion. The water bills are often electronic now. Not everybody's reading everything that goes into those. I know I don't. I cut to the chase and look at the amount. And I decide whether or not it's going to get paid, but mine get paid automatically. But you know what I'm saying? People aren't looking for all the extra detail in those electronic things. They used to when it was paper. Sometimes they might throw the other piece away that's coming out. But we have the ability now to get that information out. We have a responsibility to get it out. And use us as councillors. Councillors, we have networks. We have networks of people, and they can't be long-winded text. They need to be something that will get someone's attention. A flood on a particular street would be something that would get someone's attention. Use that negative experience to draw in the positive, and in a short, and social media is one way, but we have a lot of seniors who don't access that. We need to get that information to them as well. So be creative and share it. And us as counselors who get things out, we have electronic newsletters, we do periodic paper newsletters, and then of course there's our day-to-day social media. There's our day-to-day contact with in community meetings. We could get something from, if we could get something from you that we can print. I'm going to an open house at the fire station. Perfect opportunity to get that information out because it's related to their response as well as yours. So anything you can do on that and would be helpful. You guys are good at communications. We're good at knowing what our constituents would, what would catch their attention. Feel free to, those of us who are on the board, I think that we could, if we had a quick glimpse at a draft to tell you whether or not we think that could be effective to the people that we serve. If that's useful to you, please utilize that. But I really think this is information that people need.
Yeah, thanks very much, Commissioner Kent. I think before Jeff jumps in and speaks to the communication aspect, I think, you know, I will pass on to my team the recognition that's been given here at the board meeting, because it's very important, because, you know, we are very invested in what we do. We are public servants. We don't do it for the credit or the glory, so we kind of fly under the radar. But, you know, it is nice to be recognised. So, you know, I will make sure that that message is disseminated to through my department. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Any comment, Jeff, to Commissioner Kent?
No, I totally agree with what she's saying. One of the things that we did learn from the event that was outlined by Colin was that there are certain precautions that we need to be taking prior. One of the things that we learned essentially from the start of that storm was that even when it's working well, the customer care center can get overwhelmed with a lot of calls. So we've now basically have a system in place where the incident commander and customer care can signal to us that they're starting to get overwhelmed, and we will have launch a website page that will then be promoted on social media so that folks can actually come and let us know what's going on, and we can track it that way so we can get it to operations a lot quicker.
So, Madam Chair, may I just respond to that very quickly? I think even that will be helpful to go out in advance, because that's what often we as counselors will get, is that I tried calling that number, nobody answered. And so if people know in advance that this is our system, this is the one we need you to use, if you do not get through, go to this, because those systems get overwhelmed. People understand that.
Yeah.
But if the only option that they're being told is to call the call center, and the only time that they ever hear that there will be a backup is during a storm, that's not the time to tell them. It is, if you're lucky, they actually stay connected for that long.
Yeah, so like on a normal basis, the call center works fine. It's during these large demand at times. And so during leave, for example, we did that all proactively beforehand. So we did send out PSA saying, get ready, it's coming. We sent out another one just with some tips on water, surface water, and the impacts it can actually have on drinking water, and the potential for power outages and what that can do to water in buildings, because we say water's flowing, but if you're in a building and you don't have water, it's technically not our responsibility, but the landlords don't have the infrastructure in place because they don't have generators or whatever to get water up on multiple floors. So there's multiple things that we're trying to stick handle. But you're right, the more proactive we are in getting out that information, be ahead of time and through you guys, I think that's essential. And so I'm a big supporter of that.
I'd like to add one more thing, Madam Chair, and I know that I won't hijack this meeting anymore on this, but getting that information to councillors has to not be by way of us getting a message through Twitter, whatever it used to be called, or a Facebook post that the commission has put out. That we are managing all of that at the same time. Even now on a regular day, I don't always get connected in that way. We actually need something that comes out directly to us and might show all of your potential PSAs that you would want us to get out, and then let us disseminate that the best way that we can through our networks in advance. We often get information too late. And if we get it directly from you to us as councillors, as opposed to via the internet, much more effective and more helpful to all of us.
Okay.
Thanks.
I accept the feedback, and we usually send out, so I think the challenge we have is that the proactive PSAs we can easily manage. It's the stuff that's happening on the spot that is on the spot. So we can take that away and make it as part of our action plan when we are preparing for significant events, so that this is all more streamlined. Yes.
Thank you.
I think that's right, Jeff. I think the councillors in particular are looking for a follow-up on, what would be the specific communication plan that will enable them to, assist through this. So we'll probably take that as an action item to come back to show that. Commissioner Kolomitsev?
Thank you. My question was related first to the Farmers Dairy incident. You mentioned quite a bit of water. Can you explain where that water actually was and how it cooled to that extent?
Well, the pump station is located at the base of a small sewer shed, so it's at a low point anyway, and it's there to lift the wastewater from there up back into the system. So it's in a low spot to begin with, and as soon as the power went out, the pumps went out, and just the sheer volume of flow at that time was enough to quickly overwhelm that facility.
Okay, sounds good. And my other question was, first, maybe clarification on what your language means when you say 1 in 5, 1 in 10. I think I understand, but for anyone watching, I'd like a little explanation on that. And I'm also wondering what dictates the decision to go with 1 in 5 versus 1 in 10 in your design? And is that changing as we all start to see these unprecedented events pop up?
So the first part there is what's the probability of this event happening within 5 years? So there's a 1 in 5 chance that the rain will get to this level in this amount of time. So that's basically what 1 in 5 and 1 in 10 comes back at. They call it a return period because it's not supposed to return for that amount of time. However, we are seeing that not ring so true. As for the specification and design, as was raised by Commissioner Lovelace earlier, we've inherited a lot of this infrastructure. And then as we talk about spec and how we move forward, again, I would turn to our climate action plan there that we have internally. So that would be Kenda to comment on, and then also read again, because obviously it has an asset management and capital implications. This is not a short-term operations item.
So just speaking to the spec and the intensity of the storms that we're seeing, probably about 5 years ago, when we were reviewing the inputs to the infrastructure master plan and the integrated resource plan, we made a decision to adjust our intensity curves but for climate change. And we added probably about somewhere between 15 and 17% onto what was previously the historical curves for the Halifax area. We had troubles at that time finding something that was published by Environment Canada to recommend. So we used best practices and did an industry scan, and we added proactively that amount onto the intensity curves. So what that means is the infrastructure that was designed after that does have an added layer in there for some climate change. However, we are working on our climate action plan, and that will be coming back through to the board at the end of March. With respect to the oh, sorry, Tarek.
No, I'm sorry, Kendra, you spot on. I just wanted to add, Commissioner, is that the 100 to 1 to 100 years kind of cases now is almost standard now across provinces. In Manitoba now, because they have similar situations. They're actually moving even to 500. Mississauga moved 5 years ago to 1 to 100 years. That program alone to upgrade the stormwater system costed the taxpayers almost $5 billion. But honestly, today, a runoff there, you can have the same level of rain that happened here, and you won't see a drop or a runoff in the streets. A lot of tough cause resistance to the increase in the capital, but it paid off fairly quick. But it's happening. It is the 100 years is the new norm, I guess.
So thank you. And going to our current design standards, the pipe systems that you typically see as you drive down the streets of Halifax and Dartmouth with the catch basins and everything, those are designed to convey the 1 in 5 year storm event. And so that's the historical standard. And the curb lines on the streets, those are designed to convey the 1 in 10 year storm event. What sometimes you'll see in certain areas as they develop, there might be what we call an overland flow route. And that is what is designed to convey the 1 in 100 year storm event and try and take it from the street network, the development area, to the nearest water course to get back into its natural state and flow path. In the rural areas with the ditches and the driveway culverts, those can be typically like a 1 in 5 or a 1 in 10 year storm event, depending on what the design standard was at the time. Any of the larger cross culverts that Commissioner Lovelace was speaking to that are conveying water courses, those need to be designed to the 1 in 100 year storm event. And so one of the things that has become evident across the municipality is some of these overland flow routes may not have ever been designed or built or constructed, or are now compromised or overgrown and that type of thing. And so even though the areas that do have them, unfortunately, given the size of the storm and the intensity in which that amount of rain came down in that short period, that even if some of these areas did have the proper overland flow routes, the volume was just too much for the systems to convey. So going to where Tarek was going with the reviews and our climate action plan, those are the things that are going to inform what should we be doing, what do we need to do in the future. And again, as Colin mentioned, we are working and partnering with HRM on a lot of these initiatives and with their flood resiliency programs, and we have regular communications with them on things that we collectively should be doing and looking at, and who's leading those projects. So.
Great, thank you. And for something like a cross culvert, I understand that they're getting upgraded quite a bit right now, but what's the lifespan of one of those? How long before we're having to replace it, and how long are we expecting it to last through whatever storms come in those years?
Right. So we have a suite of different materials. And so there's the wooden culverts that exist, and what we call corrugated steel culverts, and neither of those are approved materials anymore. And so everything, we try to have concrete go back in, and anything new would be concrete for the cross culverts predominantly. You may see what we call the plastic HDPE pipe, high density polyethylene, in certain areas. So with the older ones, the wooden culverts and the corrugated steel, you're probably getting up to 50 years. There's soil conditions and different things that will impact those. But typically with the concrete and the HDPE pipes, you're hopefully getting into that 80, 100 year lifespan. So kind of varies depending on what's around them. If there's pyritic slate and that type of thing, that might impact their lifespan and everything. But that's part of what Reed's asset management team kind of tracks and keeps an eye on. So.
Great, thank you everyone for your answers.
Commissioner Cuddle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a great discussion. At the last Environment, Health and Safety Committee meeting, we did talk about doing a workshop that would, gives the opportunity to look into some of this a little more. I don't know if we kind of have the whole scope of that workshop sorted out yet. Heidi or Kenda, I don't know if you can speak to that, but I think we're all all concerned about this. Mimi just asked a few of my questions around the 1 to 5, 1 to 10. What are we designing for in the future? I mean, when you look at that that major rain event that we had was 1 in 250. Unbelievable. Like no wonder our infrastructure was overwhelmed. One of the other big concerns that I get from people is really understanding what is Halifax Water, what is HRM, how is that working together, what is HRM doing in terms of upgrading their infrastructure to handle stormwater from our right-of-ways and our roads, how is that feeding into what Halifax Water is doing. I think often in my experience is that I end up ping-ponging back and forth in trying to really understand where the intersection is and how you can mitigate an issue. Ken, I know you're familiar with a couple of my cases. But I think that is an important part of this discussion too, because we can't see the HRM and Halifax Water operating independently. And I know that you don't. I know there's conversation, but it's not always clear and apparent. And so I think having a broader discussion about that would be useful. The intensity curves, that's something I find very interesting as well. What I've heard from HRM staff in particular is that even though our rainfall annually hasn't deviated much above the averages, the intensity with which it is delivered is changing dramatically. And back to what Tarek was saying around the cost in Mississauga, like billions of dollars to upgrade to that 1 in 100 year. I mean, it's a real concern about how are we going to pay for this all? And is this a burden that we can really place on ratepayers? Or are there other avenues of revenue that we can access to do this work? Because it's it's not just this isn't just paying for a service at this point. This is like adapting to a whole new set of circumstances, that require some action. So I don't know if there's any comments about that now, but I'm hoping in the workshop that perhaps we can build in that the discussion around that financial aspect, because it's not just updating, from my understanding right now, it's not just updating for increased intensity and those like kind of 1 in 100 storms, but also new requirements around the Department of Environment around water quality, fish passage, other things that again are above and beyond what would be considered a service to ratepayers in managing things like stormwater. So yeah, I'm just kind of open for comments on any of those things.
I'll take a run at it for a minute here. So there's a few points there that I want to highlight. As far as trying to understand the differentiation of this is HRM's responsibility, this is our responsibility. Yes, that is a very confusing thing for the general public. And what we try to do, and we've had workshops on a regular basis with our operations team and our customer care team in the room with HRM's operations and customer care team. And we have kind of refreshers because there's a lot of staff changes and that type of thing. And we remind everybody, this is ours, this is theirs. But we also make the commitment, and yes, some will fall through the cracks, but we make that commitment that when somebody calls HRM's call center and it's one of our issues, we try and do what we call a soft transfer. And so that we're not just simply saying, please call the other agency. But sometimes that does happen, especially in the volume that we've seen. But what we try to do is have that behind the scenes transfer so that the customer doesn't feel like they're being bounced back and forth. So we make every effort to mitigate that. As for in a workshop, we can certainly provide that presentation on a high level of this is ours, this is theirs. And I think with one of the documents that Jeff's team produced a couple of years ago is that counselor's guide of responsibilities. And it's kind of that quick hit on everything you wanted to know, but we're afraid to ask. Yes, there we go. And if there's anything that's missing from that, we certainly are taking edits and we'll respond and refresh that. And with respect to kind of the upgrades and the things that we're seeing with the cross culverts, yes, the new world is getting certain approvals when they go through water courses, evaluating for fish passage, and we are programming those into the cost of replacements of those cross culverts because we know that it's not as simple anymore as just taking a 36-inch diameter pipe out and putting a 36 diameter pipe back in. We have to look at, is the 36-inch still the right size? And if it is, does it need fish baffles? Does it need plunge pools? And some of the culvert projects, they sound simple enough, just go in and replace the culvert, but we may not have the land within the right of way to do all of the work that's required. And so we have to work with adjacent property owners. We may have to get easements. We may have to secure land. And so just to get some of these cross culverts programmed in and constructed, it may take up to 2 to 3 years once we know that it needs to be completed, just to get the studies done on fish habitat, get the land secured, and get the materials ordered and tendered. So they are becoming more complicated, but as I said, that cost is getting programmed into the replacements. With respect to some of the larger flooding issues, and I'm going to smile at my friend Peter. He's leading the flood resiliency team at HRM, and some of the stuff that's in his programs involve the National Flood Mitigation Programming and the Disaster Mitigation Program, the NDMP, that's been before council before. And there's going to be coordination on, as I said, the day-to-day operational things with our public work, your public works, and our operations crews, in addition to some of our planning and Peter's team on some of these larger flood issues. So that's kind of, and we can provide all of that in a workshop and get into more detail as needed, but certainly that's kind of the high level of what's going on behind the scenes.
Right. Thanks, Kendall, and I look forward to that workshop. Just one comment about the communications piece, and just in case it wasn't implicit, it's not just the councillors here that need the information. I think it's all the councillors on HRM that need that information. And I could see potentially, an issue around the communication back and forth, whereas if you're communicating with all 16 councillors and receiving information from all 16 councillors, that can also get, could be a little chaotic as well. So Jeff, I just think there should be some conversation with the council support office about how to coordinate that and respond to that, because what you also don't need is 16 councillors emailing you with individual issues, because that could create expectations that can't really be met, particularly in time of emergency or crisis.
Yeah,
Sorry, Jeff, I want to comment on one thing and connect the dots, Commissioner Carroll, to what you've said earlier. Or totally, everyone on the screen that you see from the executive team, on those moments, they are really, like, I saw them firsthand, how thin they were stretched. Like, they're trying to figure out operational issues, staff morale, and all of that. But also, to your point, proactive information sharing. I think Commissioner Kent mentioned that about giving the councillors a heads up about in their constituency about, you guys become a more also a tool to communicate that, help us, educating you, help you guys, help us in a way. So it's two ways. But to your point, I am feeling firsthand that there is so much passion about this team they will pick up the phone and actually spend an hour on the call to talk to anyone trying to solve problems. But I am just feeling they're being a little bit spread thin, and Jeff can really we have the manual, and I think we will also establish processes to make sure also not to deflect or brush off these comments or concerns, because they are real, and we need to make sure you guys are armed with the right information and not send you to another thing that doesn't answer the question and come back to the person who actually can do the difference. So we are in that process of streamlining, understanding how to make sure that the system actually works effectively, and if it doesn't work, how to make sure that information is shared either proactively, or if it has to come to this level of for the team, that they understand that everything has been done right, and now it's really the next level, so we can make sure that the customers, everyone, is getting the support they need. But good, valid point. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and just one last quick question around the upgrading and the infrastructure. In new developments that are happening, have these standards been increased that developers, when they're responsible for putting in an infrastructure, they're meeting, and is it 1 in 5, 1 in 10, 1 in 100? What is the standard that is required? Has that already been approved and implemented, or is this something that's coming down the pipe?
So that's kind of a two-part thing. So Halifax Water reviews they set the intensity curve, and so the intensity curve that was flashed up there earlier, we have one in our specifications, and as I said, that was updated to reflect about a 15 to 17% increase in storm occurrences for climate change about 5 years ago. So everything that's going in that was approved in that since 2017, I think it was, that's meeting that new standard. And HRM is tasked with reviewing the overall stormwater management plans for new developments. And so as well, in the review of that stormwater management plan, there's assurances that there's an overland flow route where needed, and that the water is trying to be conveyed back to that natural water course as needed. So there's a lot more rigor involved in today's design standards and review than in the past. But that's, so we are, there is that catch up where stuff that's probably 10 years old is still designed to that previous storm intensity, but we're making those changes and adjustments going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Duncan, did you want to follow up on anything Kenda said?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think so. She pretty well captured everything. But the only thing maybe would be to confirm that when HRM reviews, development plans, we do in fact use the revised, up to date. We use the same intensity curves, right? And we've been working on a joint set of standards now. So I think for all intent and purposes, we have the exact same stormwater management standards, Kenda, that Halifax Water has. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Deagle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Oh boy, I'm conscious of the time because it's 11:28, but I almost feel that there's just so much on this topic, and does it fit here with all of the board stuff or not? But and I know that I'm supposed to apologize for being an incredible pest to Kenda and to Jeff and all that kind of stuff, but I actually can't, because you've been so good, and then I get answers done, and it really, really, really does help. I absolutely appreciate everything that you do, and I need to say that Mark McGonnell, my land, he must work 20 hours a day, the same as the rest of you guys do. But seriously, he has saved my bacon more times than I can say. He's been just amazing and helpful. And he has not always told me what I wanted to hear either, just so you know, but he's done a great job. So when we get to a workshop, I think that there'll be more detailed questions. But what I think that has been very difficult for people to understand, not that it's been the most unique event that we've had in terms of flooding, but to understand that the infrastructure was never meant to handle it. And so there is so much that, people say that this wouldn't have happened if the infrastructure was done in the right place. This wouldn't have happened if that development hadn't been approved, because now like water naturally runs downhill, and so all of that stuff. When I walked the Waverly Road for an entire week and talked to people, the biggest concern was the decision around changing the culverts, from the wooden culverts that had slats where the water runoff could come down through the slats, but now it's poured over concrete, so the water just comes straight down the driveway across the road and into the properties that might be on the water side. So I think, and I really appreciate some of the newsletters that Halifax Water does. And I was just wondering, when Councillor Kent was talking about the communication plan, understanding why decisions are made in the way that they're made. So in some way, some of that, like when maybe all of us could sort of find a place to put the information in to say, these are the decisions that are made that people are having the most challenge with, understanding the why of it. So I think that might help a little bit. But I'll bring that forward more when we do the workshop than here in this board meeting. But I do need to say that the amount of work that was done in such a short time frame, I was on the Highway 2 right in Fall River, and this lady stopped me and she said, "You're the counselor for the area and you're on the Water Commission." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I need to tell you, thank you." She said, "I come from another province in another country." And she said, "We would never have seen this kind of response." She actually went around her neighborhood saying, "People be patient. This is incredible work that's being done." So I just wanted to share that with you here, because I thought it's something that should be heard and it should be said. So really, thank you very much. That's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Deagle-Gammon. Well said. Commissioner Zaharov.
Yeah, just quick comment, Madam Chair, on the communication piece. Just wanted to add that, the results of the response that Halifax Water had would be also, some pieces of this information would be nice to share with the public, so people will understand what level of effort the Halifax Water team undertook and the response provided, because many times Halifax Water is taken for granted, and somehow, the work is not done magically. There is lots of sweat and blood in this work. So it would be nice to share the credit that, and the work that team has done with the public. That's it. Thank you.
We are developing something, excuse me. We need to be very balanced in understanding how much we've done, but yet how much there still is to do. And so it's just getting to that comfort level and being okay with it. And once we have that, we will send out something to kind of let people know that we have work already done, but there is so much more work to do without making people feel like we've forgotten them. So that's the key thing.
And Madam Chair, I'll add somewhat tongue-in-cheek, Commissioner Zaharov, because I know you didn't intend it this way, but we certainly do work very hard not to shed any blood during our work. We have a very strong safety program here at Halifax Water, and we believe strongly in it, and we promote it highly.
Appreciate the comment. Thank you.
We bleed blue is what it is.
Well, thank you, everyone. Great discussion, and I agree on all points. A remarkable response, and yet so much more to do. So we look forward to that discussion and the follow-up discussion on continuing to improve our response plans as more and more is asked of this team every day. So thank you again, and thank you to the entire Halifax Water team, as well as the HRM. It was a remarkable event. Okay, we're moving on to the last item on the agenda. Item number 6, capital project spending summary. I have a motion to be put on the floor.
You can do it, Madam Chair.
Oh,
Go ahead, Commissioner Zaharov.
I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve for filing with the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board the capital project spending summary for the period April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023, and the capital project spending over 1 million summary for the period April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Cuddle for the second. Thank you. I'm not sure who's presenting.
That would be
Um,
me.
Alicia is going to speak to this and we'll answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead, Alicia. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. This is an annual filing requirement for the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. We are required to submit a report showing our capital additions to utility plant and service and whether they were over or under budget for their total budgets. Overall, we were underspent on our additions to utility plant and service by 4.8 million for fiscal 22-23. And these, the excess funds will be used to fund future overspend on capital projects. I do want to note there will be one minor change in the report. On page 2, it stated that there was a net deficit for wastewater projects, and this should have said surplus. So we will be making that adjustment prior to submission to the UARB. Any questions?
The report goes without questions, Alicia. Well done, and thank you for that. Being no questions, we'll call for the vote. The motion is on the screen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. Motion is carried. Thank you, Alicia. That brings us to the end of our agenda for today. I need a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Kent. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of the meeting. See you next time.
Thank you.
Well done, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.